Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Real Talk on Racism. I am your host, Russ Terry. We're super grateful to our viewers for watching. It's a small but loyal group, so if you're seeing this episode and the content inspires you, please share with others. You can go to our website, realtalkonracism.org, for all of the prior episode. Binge watch, it's a fun thing to do, and you'll learn a lot and be inspired too. Okay, so today I am very honored to have with us Thomas Calhoun Jr. Thomas, all the way up from the DMV. Thank you for having me. Getting all the way up here.
Yeah, the trip was amazing. Haven't had a train ride in quite some time.
Well, you are our second straight guest to come up from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, so I'm super grateful to both of you for coming all the way up here to appear on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. And I love your mission. I can't wait to dive in and hear about all the great things you have to say. Okay. All right, so first question for you. Is it accurate to say your mission is to help people of color bring their products and services to market?
I would say that is mostly accurate. While I do think it's important to, identify all backgrounds, my personal mission right now is focused on folks of African descent, right? Black folks, right? So I try not to use people of color as a metaphor or some other symbolism for black. People of color should be all people of color, and black should be black, or Hispanic should be Hispanic, or whatever. So right now I've been hyper focused on my community, because I just feel like that's where I have the background, the expertise. So
thank you for clarifying, because obviously as a white person I try to be super inclusive, so right. If I'm saying people of color but referring to the black community, then I'm glad that you want to clarify that it's the black community specifically that is part of your mission.
Yeah, I think I don't want to narrow it necessarily to that, but I also don't want to use that language to refer it, as you probably know, right? Like benign neglect and things where folks were trying not to focus so much on the black experience to kind of get that out of the news. This is really why we have terms like people of color and everything, right? Diverse. We'll use any other word rather than say black, because that was the whole Nixon benign neglect thing.
So I just learned something, and we're only 2 minutes in. So I actually don't know what that means. What does benign neglect mean?
So really, during the civil rights movement and everything, they had gotten to the point where there was so much commotion, right? Sort of, from Malcolm and Martin and all the folks who were who were doing all these things across the country. So Moynihan and Nixon get together and they said, let's just stop talking about it. Let's stop talking about race, right? And so there's a system of what they call benign neglect. You can Google it, where they just stop talking about it. And so if you just don't mention it, it kind of goes away, So if you notice in media all over the country, in all honesty, when people use the term people of color, or one of my personal favorites is, we're investing in diverse founders, or this company has diverse founders. Well, what does that mean? What does that even mean, right? And so does it mean that there's 3 different ethnicities, or there's lots of ways to be diverse? Is it gender diverse? Is it socioeconomically diverse? You know what I mean? So it's just really, we come up with it. It's been 50, 60 years since they've come up with this system of benign neglect, and people don't know why it's happening or where it originated.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me and with all of us today, and I promise to be direct and use exactly the
if
words.
you're referring to the Hispanic community,
right?
Refer to the Hispanic community. If you're referring to, in many cases they know who they are, and sometimes you are just referring to people of color,
right?
And that's fair.
Got it. Okay, so your mission is to help fellow black folks bring their products and services to market.
My mission right now, actually, that's a subset of it, but my mission, I think I started out doing that. I had a tech company I was starting called Nafasi, sort of the Opportunity Network, Nafasi Swahili for opportunity, and space for opportunity. And I was sort of trying to be sort of LinkedIn for startups, and connect ideas, talent, and capital together for Black folks. However, what I learned is that there's so many systemic issues that starting from that space was just really difficult. Not the least of which is, Black founders are receiving 1/10,000th of venture capital.
1/10,000th. So for every 10,000 that a white person gets, a Black person gets.
So if you look at it this way, this is the way to look at it. Like, of all startups, regardless of who, is a founder or a founder's background, only about 1 in 100 is going to get venture funding, regardless.
Okay.
Right? Of that 1%, only 1% is Black. Oof. Right? So then there's Black men and Black women, and there's this big fight about, well, Black women are only getting 0.0043, but that's because Black men are only getting 0.0057. So it's really not like we're doing that much better. We're fighting over 10,000th of a percent. It's so you mean, so it's just like, or 7 really. So it's not between us. So we really should be focused on the 99% and not what we're not getting. But anyway, so those are the numbers, and so there's just so many challenges. It's hard to solve that problem in one stroke. So, and one of the main challenges that I found was there's not mentorship, and there's not really a lot of trust. And there's not, I think assimilation has caused, I'm sure assimilation has caused Black people to not even have some identity challenges sometimes. And we spend so much time trying to fit in that we don't really do enough self-reflection, investment. So right now I'm really focused on purpose, right? And you probably see me post a lot about purpose. So, and that's, reclaiming the master copy of your life, right? Own your masters, right?
Aha.
Right? Like really focusing on, what I believe God or your creator, whoever you choose to believe in, like has called you to do. And you have some gifts, and that's what Truth Be Told is all about. I know you're going to get to that later, but it's really all about, it's a show about purpose. And so everybody that is in business, if I interviewed you, I could probably talk to you long enough and I understand sort of your arc and how you got here in the seat. And but if you identify that earlier, then you can get going in that earlier, and then you will have more confidence and identity, and you will have some sense of ownership that no one can take from you. And now you're empowered to do other things. Right? I know that's a long answer, but
no, I think I get it. So it's almost like the purpose is the foundation.
It's the foundation of everything. Like the key is self-mastery. If you don't have self-mastery, like you're not going to really be able to accomplish anything. You're certainly not going to, and that's it. Anyone who doesn't have self-mastery is easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to own, right? So it really is about self-mastery right now. So I'm highlighting people who have accomplished some semblance of self-mastery to the extent that they've gone out and disciplined themselves enough to be able to fund their lives and their lifestyle and their livelihood with their gifts and talents. And I think that's freedom, because we've seen in the last couple of years, we've seen George Floyd, we've seen all these things, Breonna Taylor, all these marches, all these things. Why do they end? Why do you think they end? Why do people stop? They're still dead. There's still atrocities going on right now. Why are people not out there?
Oh gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. Is it rhetorical, or do you want me to answer?
What would you think?
I mean, I know, the news cycle is
that's
like
a big part of
the
it.
Time the next big thing happens, people move on to whatever the next thing is, and I don't want to say people forget about, because that would be insensitive to them and their families, but I think it gets focused on them gets reduced. Yeah, it gets pushed down.
In the news cycle, for sure. I've seen three or four police shootings just on Instagram reported this week, in the last 7 days, I'll say, right? People stop in general because they got to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't march and protest all day. You have to feed your family.
Yeah.
Right? If we stopped to march every time some atrocity happened, we couldn't do. So what I'm saying is, and what happens when you have to go to work and work in spaces where they don't care about it, or right? So you don't even have. So when you have self-mastery and when you have ownership, and you can create spaces for yourself that are safe and that have priorities for your community, then you can do some of these other things, right? Right? But if you have to go to work and pretend that something isn't happening or isn't bothering you, that in and of itself is toxic. So.
Got it, because I know for me as an entrepreneur, like yesterday,
Sure.
I worked an hour, and I still make my corporate America money, but
Sure.
in an hour, which then helps me, I wasn't marching, but I have family responsibilities, caregiving, things of that nature, of people older relatives that live in another state. So I get it, by creating this financial freedom for myself, I can do more in the world than, pardon my language, working for the man for 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And this is not to say don't work for the man, because I have a consulting business and I have to do what I have to do to eat for now, right? But the objective is to get to a place where my money is working for you. So after self-mastery is, sort of conscious capitalism while you're doing that, right? And of course, asset acquisition, right? Am I acquiring assets that will produce the income that can give me the freedom to do and say the things that I need to do, say and do. So that's the mission. Right, and so underneath that, of course, somebody needs to start a business or start a product, and if I can help, then that's great. But what I'm realizing is just the self-mastery, and for myself as well. Like, self-mastery has been my personal goal right now.
Okay, so I have about 20 follow-up questions on all of that, but I'll try and narrow it down to a few. So you did reference a couple times a few minutes ago, so many systemic issues, systemic racism, so many challenges. So what would you say is one or two of the most prominent systemic racism issues that exist that negatively affect Black people?
I mean, that's tough. So just by definition, right, systemic, they're all connected, right? So that's really tough. But if I had to break it down to one or two things, I would think number one would have to be, and this is just my bent, right? Ask somebody else, will give you something else, right? Number one is economics, right? If he who has the goal makes the rules, right? And we know that we talk about voting and all these things, and in the end, I think I read the economic judiciary, community economics or something senior in the Congress. They were talking about maybe like in 50 years since the assassination of MLK, Black people really haven't made that much economic progress. And this is with Clinton for 8 years, Obama for 8 years. In that same 50 years, it's been 16 years of those two, and not to knock either of those two, but I mean, we've had economic booms and busts throughout the time, and large swaths of wealth have been transfers have happened, and very little of it has fallen in the hands of Black folks. So I think economic inequality and economic ignorance, to some degree, just being shut out, right? You're talking about like redlining and getting loans for.
What's redlining?
Redlining in the community, right? That's why a lot of Black houses may be keeping Black people within a certain place in the community and saying they can't, creating laws in cities and municipalities that say Black people can't own houses over here, and then of course the houses over on the other side of that red line are valued more and things of that nature. So that's a way to be systematically shut out.
So laws like that still exist?
Well, they're still finding them, but on some was a city in maybe is it Minneapolis somewhere where they're just now realizing that some of those laws are being taken out. It's not like they're being necessarily enforced at this time in the same way they were, but even if the law, this is the great thing about being systematic versus once it's systematic long enough, it can become systemic to the extent that now, how many times late in the last year or two have you heard or seen or read USA Today or somebody report that an appraiser came in and appraised the house for greater value because the same house because they saw black pictures or things in it, and then they took it out, and somebody else came back and appraised it for $300,000-$400,000 more. Right? That's being economically shut out because a large amount of wealth transfer and wealth creation in this country is through home ownership, particularly for white Americans. So that's what I mean by redlining. That's one part of being economically shut out. And it's not due to lack of innovation or lack of trying. I mean, we have Seneca Village in New York that was black, and you have Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and Black Wall Street in Durham, and Richmond, and all these things or Wilmington that are taken away, bombed, whatever. So a lot of things have caused that. So number one, I would have to say just the economic viability of the black community and the exploitation through whether it's the NCAA or the NFL. They're 70% black, no black ownership. So a lack of ownership. Black people don't own what we dominate, and that you can't advance in the game of Monopoly if you don't. Everybody has to go across Boardwalk and Park Place, right? So whoever owns it is gonna collect money at some point. If everybody's watching the NFL and 70% of the people playing, are black, then it is an atrocity for there to be no black owners. So they're still fighting about black coaches, which is ridiculous because he who has to go makes the rules. So if I own the team, then I can hire whoever I want to coach, right? So if they would just fight, we don't even know what to fight for. So that's the second thing. This our mentality. Our misunderstanding, we kind of chase the wrong goals. We don't even have the right goals. We think that, if we vote this way, then it's going to change. But then we look at the data and it hasn't changed. In fact, if anything's not changing, it's getting worse, right? So you have to have the money to put the person there that could push your interests. So if you're not getting involved until you get to the ballot box in November or every other November, all right, hopefully, then you're already behind the curve because somebody else put that person there with their dollars, and those are the interests that they're going to protect and advance. So we're not even in the game politically because we're not in the game economically. So everything, it just seems like we're doing something, but we're really not.
Oof. Well,
I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit, if that's okay, to your own background. Let's talk education first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you went to an HBCU undergrad, Norfolk State University. I pronounced Norfolk right? Is that?
Norfolk. We call it Norfolk down there because we're country.
Okay.
But,
hopefully I was close enough.
Fine. Yeah.
And then University of Virginia for your master's.
For sure.
How did those two experiences compare with each other? Going to an HBCU first and then going to a non-HBCU, if you will, in terms of whatever comparisons you want to make, how it set you up for the world, the things that you learned, the experience with others there, etc.
That's a great question.
Oh, thank you.
That's a great question. I always say to people that's like, they were both my, they're both the most important educational experiences I've ever had. UVA could never give me what Norfolk State gave me. It's just not possible. And so I would say to any black parent that, particularly in my case, I had gone to white schools, almost predominantly white schools, all my life leading up to college.
Okay.
Right? And even where there was like 60-40 or something, the money that was supporting and surrounding it was just more culturally geared towards white folks. And so good schools had a blast, but that was my background. So going to Norfolk State, I really didn't know what to expect and know how to handle it. And so, but I ended up seeing PhDs in math and computer science and physics and all the things, right? Biologists, and
all of whom were black.
Many of whom were black. Some
Okay.
of them were Asian or whatever. But
Okay.
but I did see many. That's country, right? Many black folks who were PhDs and master's degrees and who were teaching us mathematics, who also got their PhD from NC State and UVA and things of that nature. So, but culturally, my dad told me, like, this is the last time in your life you're going to be in the majority. And I didn't know what that meant at 16 or 17, right? Fully. Like, I have a pretty conscious family, but I didn't fully understand what that meant. And the truth about the two juxtaposition of those two schools is the work experience in between. That's what really did the trick. Like,
How so?
Because coming out of Norfolk State undergrad, and I'm in the majority for 5 years, switched my major a lot.
All good. This is a judgment-free zone here. We'll talk on racism.
Yeah. So going into the workforce, I wasn't prepared for the transition back into white spaces predominantly. Even though I worked and I had a job, I think I just didn't have that buffer between. I walked in May, June 18th I moved to Maryland, June 19th I started my job. I really didn't, and I'm out of. It's like a portal. I just went into a new world, and I went from 8,000 or 9,000 black people on campus at a time, 10,000 with everybody there, and to 15 black people in a 200-person company. Oof. And you're like, 12 of which went to HBCUs. Oof. And I have some good stories with. I'll come back and tell some other good stories when I launch my book. But that experience, then going into UVA, was like, all right, I worked for 7 years and those work experiences, and I was really ready to get out of corporate America and start my own. Back in corporate America, but for myself. And that prepared me. The UVA was just a dream. I always wanted to go to law school. And so UVA gave me the challenge, a different set of challenges. Like, they were really bright. It was like maybe 300 people applied to the program I was in. They only accepted like 30 and in our cohort. And it was just really, I met some really smart people. Only 2 black people. 29, 30 people, 2 black, 1 Indian woman, and the rest white male. Right? So there, so that speaks to the diversity in engineering right there.
Or lack thereof. Yeah.
Right. So there was challenges, but most of them were good challenges. Most of them were academic in nature.
So I don't want to assume anything. If there was a black parent watching this, would you recommend that their kids go to an HBCU for undergrad and a non-HBCU for grad school for the diversity of experiences that kid could potentially get from both? So the first question, absolutely recommend go to an HBCU for undergrad. Like, that experience is just, it's just unmatched. You can't really, and I really say that. I know a couple people who, I know one one woman who went to UVA for undergrad and then went to law school at an HBCU. Okay, so the opposite.
So the opposite.
Okay.
And of course, but graduate school is just a different experience, and especially if you're in law school, that's serious business, right? So, so you still get some of the cultural elements, but I think the youthful exuberance that you have at 17 or 18 years old, and the shaping that does, is a little different. In undergrad than grad, and so I would recommend that direction. But having an HBCU experience is, I don't know, it's just unparalleled. I can't really describe it. You had to be there, right? And every campus has their own. You had to be there.
Thomas Calhoun Jr., final word of wisdom or words of wisdom for our audience. What's the last thing you want to share?
Own your masters, right?
Yes, I want to get
Number
a shirt,
one.
by the way.
I will definitely
I'll buy
something.
it. Okay.
So, number one, self-mastery, right? Number two, conscious capitalism. Be willing to purchase from one another and support one another, right? We can't be in business if you won't buy from us, right? So that's number two. And then asset acquisition. Like if your money's not working for you, then you will always be working for someone else. So that's it. That's my life. That's everything I'm about right now.
Well, you have an inspiring mission and message, and we probably could have had a 90-minute episode, so I appreciate you breaking it down into 28 minutes.
If I took us over, man.
It's all good. It's
so
all good. You
yeah.
have lots of great things to share, and I'm so honored and grateful I got to meet you today in
Likewise.
person and hear all the great things you had to say.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thank you for watching another episode of Real Talk on Racism. For all of us here, we'll see you next time.